All right. I think it goes live sooner than it shows me. But I'm posting the link for a minute in the Ask Mr. Litt's document. I've noticed a trick too. If you refresh the page, the YouTube page, then the live stream comes up. Mine didn't pop up until. Okay. Hey everybody. Good to see everybody. I'm just posting the link in the Ask Mr. Litt questions document. That's what I'm doing over here. Some people like using that link. There we go. Just posted it so that people can link up. Good times. All right, today we're going to pick up reading the book again. I know I said it would take a break for 2 days, but one was good. We saw yesterday Mr. James Hampton. That is one of 2 pictures of him that are in existence. And that's in his carriage house where he made his amazing sculpture. So you can see when we get to the description, which we'll get to today, that's what that's about. And when I see you this afternoon for the afternoon Zoom, I'm going to show just 4 minutes of that also too. Okay. Giving people a minute to arrive. They're eating snacks and stuff, you know? All right. Looks like we have another 15 people. Good times. There we go. Chapter 27. Page 123. Again, here we go. That's my picture over his. There's my picture over his. There's my picture over his. Ah! That is Mr. James Hampton. One of the only 2 pictures in existence of Mr. James Hampton. And I don't know if you can see the furniture. Look, the furniture. Just what a work. Amazing. All right. All Arthur saw. Oh, page 124. Excuse me. All Arthur saw at first was a wall. Good. All Arthur saw was a wall of gold and silver. A stunned gasp escaped him. What the heck had he stumbled on? It looked like a shimmering shrine inside the garage, like something you'd see in a Hollywood movie set or in an Egyptian temple or something. There were glittering tables, silver pillars, gilt pedestals, throne like chairs. And remember, that's throne like a king's throne, not like we threw it, past tense. Arthur couldn't believe his eyes. Radiant gold and silver objects filled almost half of the room. The pieces piled so high, they nearly touched the low ceiling lights. It was unreal. Arthur wondered if he was having a hallucination or some kind of crazy dream. Was he really standing inside Mr. Hampton's garage in Washington, D.C.? He closed his eyes and he opened them again just to check if everything was still there, and it was. That's when he noticed something else. There were wings everywhere. They were attached to sides of tables, the backs of chairs, the pedestals and the pillars. Everything he could see had its own pair of sparkling wings. Arthur remembered what Mr. Hampton said about his dad hats. I took it for the wings. Was this what he meant? Still trying to grasp the unbelievable scene in front of him, Arthur stood motionless by the door. His leaky boots made 2 moist prints, like wings, on the cement. Where had Mr. Hampton found all these things? And what was the mysterious creation supposed to be? Arthur might have stayed frozen in the same spot forever, lost in the vision of the shimmering world, if it hadn't been for the sound. From the opposite side of the garage, Arthur heard a low moan. His eyes darted to the far corner of the garage, where there didn't seem to be much light, only pools of darkness and shadow. and piles of stuff he couldn't really identify in the gloom, except for one thing: a man lying on the floor. He wore a familiar tan coat. His shoes were still on his feet. A pair of shattered glasses rested on the floor in front of his head. Arthur's heart dropped. It was James Hampton. That's the end of that chapter. That's a fast chapter, huh? Page 126. Chapter 28. Later on, Arthur couldn't remember everything that had happened. It was like the night his dad died. He could only recall certain sights and sounds, like the reins on the officer's shoulders and the word instantly. Arthur remembered running over to James Hampton and picking up his broken glasses from the cement floor. He remembered the bitter smell of vomit around him, and remembered crouching down next to the old man, praying, begging, hoping he was still alive. "Who are you?" Mr. Hampton said, suddenly opening his eyes and scaring the heck out of Arthur. I'm Arthur Owens." The man's dark eyes looked distant and unfocused, as if they really didn't see Arthur but someone else. "I don't know you." "Tell me where I am, Saint." Arthur swallowed, unsure what to answer. "We're in your garage. And I'm not a saint. I'm Arthur Owens. The kid doing the probation sentence for you?" "Oh, Saint Arthur," the man murmured, his eyes sliding close again. "Now I know who you are. You're the one who saved me." Redemption. Theme again, right? Saving. "I didn't save you," said Arthur, but stopped when Mr. Hampton closed his eyes and rasping breath. He could feel panic rising in his throat. He didn't know if Mr. Hampton had fallen or had a heart attack or what. With his face crumpled against the cold cement floor, he didn't look good. He looked like he was dying. Arthur glanced towards the side door of the garage, hoping someone would arrive. If Mr. Hampton died while he was there, nobody would believe it wasn't his fault. But nobody came. He shook the old man's shoulders, begging him to wake up. "Can you hear me, Mr. Hampton? I have to go get some help for you, okay?" Through the garage, the man didn't answer or move. The dozens of gold and silver wings were made motionless. Nothing stirred. Arthur felt as if he was about to explode with fear. He was afraid to stay with Mr. Hampton, and he was also afraid to leave. He already deserted Mr. Hampton once. He left him lying alone on a city sidewalk, and he ran away like a coward. If he left to get help, would he look like a coward again? Okay, I'm just looking at the comments for a second. Okay. Arthur decided he had to take the chance. He shouldn't stay there and watch him die. Standing up, he took one last look at the motionless man, and he ran to go get Groovy Jim. The rest of what happened to Arthur was a blur. He remembered bursting into Groovy Jim's shop, shouting things that probably didn't make much sense about finding Mr. Hampton on the floor and calling the police. He remembered Groovy Jim running up the gravel alley in his slippers with his burly customer following behind him, and remembered almost crying with relief when Groovy Jim kneeled down next to Mr. Hampton, and Mr. Hampton opened his eyes again. "What happened to you, buddy?" Groovy Jim said to him, trying to sound calm as he tucked the old man's coat tight around him. "You take a fall and hit your head?" "No," said Mr. Hampton. "I'm ready to go." "Go where?" Groovy Jim asked. "Heaven," replied Mr. Hampton. His eyes closed again. Looking startled, Groovy Jim glanced back at Arthur and his customer. "Well, I don't think heaven is ready for you yet, buddy. You need to stay right here with us until help gets here. You've got a lot of years left to live. You can't get rid of us that easy." He pointed towards the dazzling display on the other end of the garage. "Man, that's a pretty cool collection of stuff you got over there. Why didn't you tell us about it?" Surprisingly, the question seemed to bring James Hampton back to the real world again. "Not stuff. It's heaven. St. Arthur and I have been busy building heaven." Groovy Jim's eyes darted towards Arthur, who stared at Mr. Hampton easily. What is this guy talking about? I've been helping you collect junk, remember? He blurted out as if he might jog Mr. Hampton's memory. Remember the list of the 7 most important things? Foil, cardboard, glass. He stumbled through the simple list of items he'd been collecting since December. Exactly. What else do you think heaven would be made out of? Quite a quote there. So, I've been asking you to put a quote in your writing, and I've been leaving it to you. I haven't taught you how to find a quote. And I think one of the reasons I haven't taught you is because finding a quote is kind of like thinking. How do you teach somebody how to think? There's a magic involved. I think finding a quote, when you read something, it makes you think of something and it just resonates. So I'm going to put up some possible quotes for writing with our next writing. But as you listen, I'm hoping you're listening for quotes. Many of you have read ahead and you say you know what happens. But even if you have read ahead, I feel like this book is great for a reread and hearing the depths of the details. Because this book is written so well, there's always little details that you catch the next times around. Like, I love that line. I do not remember that line. I've read this book 5 times. What else would heaven be made out of? So that gets into that theme too. Redemption, saving something. Ordinary junk can make heaven if a person has vision. Love that stuff. I'm going to keep reading. I ain't stopping. All the way to the hospital. Okay, chapter 29. Chapter 29. Chapter 29, page 130. All the way to the hospital. Arthur kept thinking about what Mr. Hampton said. It seemed like forever the ambulance had arrived for him. Once Mr. Hampton had been loaded into it, Arthur got into one of the cop cars to ride to the hospital. Groovy Jim stayed behind to finish working on his customer. You sure you don't mind going by yourself? Groovy Jim asked before he left. Arthur nodded, even though he really actually wasn't okay with it. He had no idea what he's supposed to do once they got to the hospital, or how he was going to get home. He didn't have a dime to call anybody. It was the 1960s. 10 cents would get you a phone call. And they had payphones, lots of them. Payphones don't exist anymore. I've seen like one. When the cop got into the car, he turned to Arthur and he said, "Bet this is your first ride in a police car, isn't it, kid?" Arthur said, "Yeah." He resisted adding that his first ride without handcuffs. This was his first ride without handcuffs. As the officer backed the car down the alley and sped down the block, siren blaring, Arthur kept going over and over in his mind what James Hampton said. Had he really made all the gold and silver pieces in the garage himself? Had he really meant they were supposed to look like heaven? The place with angels and pearly gates and all that stuff? After his dad died, this book always goes back, Arthur had spent a lot of time thinking about heaven, wondering if it was real and wondering what heaven was like. Wondering if his dad was in heaven, despite what his stupid aunt said at the funeral home. Sometimes in juvie, when he couldn't sleep, he would try to picture the perfect heaven for his dad. He would imagine a place full of motorcycles and things to fix, because his dad always liked to tinker with stuff. A place that was sunny and warm all the time, so his dad would never have to put his Harley away in the garage. Mostly he pictured heaven being kind of Florida with motorcycles. That's heaven to some people. Florida with motorcycles. I love that. That's so funny. But he never imagined finding heaven in a garage in Washington, D.C. That's where they lived. He still couldn't believe what he had seen. Had the whole thing been really made out of junk he collected? Arthur closed his eyes, trying to recall what the arrangement had looked like. He hadn't gotten a good look at the pieces, but it seemed possible that the fancy tables and chairs and pillars were made of stuff from the trash. Nobody was that good of an artist. Now's the time. Nobody was that good of an artist. Nobody was that good of an artist. Nobody was that good of an artist. Yes, somebody was that good of an artist. But those things were all wings. How could you explain the wings? Mr. Hampton had taken his father's hat for wings, and he had signed all his notes St. James. The grocery cart was a chariot, Hampton had told Arthur's sister. The week before, he'd sent Arthur to find a throne. Thrones, chariots, wings, saints equals heaven. Arthur shook his head. It made sense, but it also didn't make sense at the same time. But the more puzzling question was, why? Why heaven? Why was Hampton building heaven? And Arthur glanced anxiously over his shoulder at the ambulance screaming through the rain behind him. What if Mr. Hampton died before Arthur found out? We still have more times. I'm going to keep reading. Chapter 30. I can't get it in the camera. Chapter 30. Page 133. They wheeled James Hampton through the whooshing doors of the emergency room, and a young nurse took Arthur to the waiting room. Arthur wasn't sure what happened to the policeman, but he never returned after dropping him off. Well, we'll come and get you once he's stabilized, the nurse said kindly, and steered Arthur towards some empty seats. What's your name? My name's Arthur Owens. Is the man you brought in a friend of yours? No, he's someone I help out sometimes. He knew this sounded weird, but what else was he supposed to say? The nurse pressed her lips together as if this wasn't the answer she was hoping for. She seemed unsure what to do next, and Arthur wondered if maybe she hadn't been on the job very long. Do you know if he has any family we can contact? Arthur shook his head, remembering Mr. Hampton told his sister. No kids, no house. I don't think so. Okay. She patted Arthur on the shoulder, and Arthur felt embarrassed. We'll see what we can find out. Can I get you some juice or cookies while you're waiting? We have some in the back. Arthur wanted to say yes, but his throat felt very dry and his stomach grumbled. But despite that, he heard him say, no, I'm fine, thanks. He didn't know why he had to appear tough and strong in front of the nurse, but he did. All right, so there's a little clue to Arthur's character. You know, you want to look for quotes. Sometimes you have to read sections, and that's a clue to his character. He has to always feel like he appears tough and everything. No spoilers. No spoilers. I saw a chat about who wants a spoiler. Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it. All right, just sit tight, and I'll let you know some news, okay? Arthur watched the nurse turn and disappear through a set of doors marked staff only, and she was his last connection to the outside world. He had never been in a hospital by himself before. Sagging into one of the uncomfortable chairs, he gazed around the waiting room. Payphone, 2 televisions, a magazine rack with no magazines on it. People in the room looked like they had been there for weeks. Some slept, a few read. Arthur had no idea what to do. He was miles away from home, no way of telling anyone where he was. He wished he had Squeak's phone number. At least Squeak would be someone to talk to. Peppermint? Asked an old woman with rumpled hair, holding a piece of candy out to him. No, thanks. He didn't want to make friends with anybody here. And he didn't want anybody to try to make friends with him, either. There were no clocks in the waiting room. Arthur had no idea how much time has passed before the same nurse finally came to get him. All he knew was that his head was pounding, and he felt dizzy when he stood up. Mr. Hampton is doing better now, so you can see him for a few minutes. He called you a saint for saving him. Isn't that sweet? Yeah, but he calls a lot of people that. Well, you got him here in time. That's the most important thing. She gave Arthur another one of those dazzling smiles, and he couldn't imagine how a person that nice could stick people with needles. Is he going to be okay? Arthur asked. Because it seemed like something you ought to ask. I'll let him talk to you, said the nurse. Here we are, and she opened the green curtain. Mr. Hampton, I have a visitor for you. It's the saint you were asking about. Well, his shaky voice replied. Bring him in. The nurse pushed the curtain aside, and Arthur took a deep breath to calm himself, and he stepped into the space, told himself not to be afraid. He had just no idea what to expect. He found Mr. Hampton on the floor of the garage that morning. Arthur hadn't seen him face to face since the day in the courtroom. This is the first time since then. He wasn't even sure he was allowed to be face to face with him. When Arthur came in, Mr. Hampton was propped up in a hospital bed, covered in blankets. He didn't resemble that neat brown-suited man from the courtroom or the crazy junk man. He kind of just looked tired. His skin reminded Arthur of the cardboard he'd been collecting for months. Cardboard that had been left out in the rain. Rain-soaked and sagging cardboard. That's what he thought. Mr. Hampton lifted his hand from the blankets in a small wave. Arthur noticed for the first time that he was no longer wearing the cast or the sling on his arm. "So we meet again," said the old man. "Yes." Arthur nodded, shifting uncomfortably. Arthur asked him, Are you feeling better?" He was hoping it wasn't an impolite question. "Better is a relative term," said Mr. Hampton. "I'm better than I was an hour ago, but not as good as I used to be." Arthur wasn't sure if he was asking was wrong, but fortunately, a buzzer in the hallway interrupted the conversation. "You can visit a little while longer if you like, but I need to leave for a minute. I'll take you to the waiting room once I get back." "There's an alarm if you need anything, okay, Mr. Hampton?" Arthur was relieved the nurse talked extra loudly to him, too, and it wasn't just Arthur. After the nurse left, Mr. Hampton motioned Arthur. Let me shake your hand. Come here and let me shake your hand, young man." Arthur was startled. Didn't remember the guy? He was the one who threw the brick at him. "I don't bite," said the old man. Reluctantly, Arthur stepped towards him. For some reason, it seemed wrong to shake hands with the man he had almost killed. He half expected a big lightning bolt to come down and zap him, or the police to barge in and arrest him. But that didn't happen. It was just an ordinary handshake. For as tired as he looked, Mr. Hampton's grip was really strong. "I want to thank you for saving me twice." "Twice?" Arthur was confused. "The brick. Surely you haven't forgotten that," said Mr. Hampton. "No," said Arthur. "Well, that was the first time you saved me." "What?" Arthur thought. Maybe Mr. Hampton didn't remember exactly what happened. "No, I was the one that threw the brick that hit you in the shoulder." He tried to explain. "You fell on the sidewalk. You broke your arm. And then someone else had to help you and stop." "Nope. That's where you're wrong, young man," said Mr. Hampton. "I needed assistance with my project. And your brick falling out of the sky and breaking my arm is what brought the two of us together. That way, I could keep building my masterpiece while you collected the 7 most important things for me. So it was you, with the brick, who saved me." Arthur shook his head slowly. He thought the guy was nuts. "It's true," said Mr. Hampton. He stuck 2 fingers in the air. "Second time you saved me was this morning. I could have been lying there for days if you hadn't found me. Twice. Like I said, you saved me twice." "Okay," said Arthur, feeling a little guilty for agreeing with the guy. But he just didn't know what else to do. He knew he didn't throw the brick to help anybody, especially Mr. Hampton. After a minute or two of silence, the man's eyes opened again. "How much do you know about my work, Arthur?" "Not much." Well, I'm building the throne of the 3rd heaven." "All right," Arthur nodded politely, as if building heaven was a perfectly normal thing to do. He didn't dare how much heavens and thrones there were altogether, or how Mr. Hampton knew he was building the third one. "Have you ever met an artist who is creating heaven, Arthur?" Arthur admitted, "No, I haven't." "That's because no one else has done it." "You can do your own research if you want. Go to the library, look it up. Lots of people have done hell. Hell is easy to create." Arthur figured that was probably true. He could probably do a decent drawing of what that was like based on the past years of his life. "Heaven, that's a whole different ball game," Mr. Hampton continued. "It takes years. It could take a lifetime. I have a lot left to do, Arthur." Arthur couldn't help remembering just a few hours earlier, Mr. Hampton was saying he wanted to die. He was glad the guy seemed to change his mind. Pause. I'm not so sure he wanted to die. He wanted to go to heaven. That's not what he said. Arthur interpreted it that way. Okay, there's a lot of interesting chatting going on. If you really want to go ahead, read ahead. But right now, James Hampton's alive. I'm stuck here right now. The man waved one arm in the air, looking irritated by his surroundings, because he said he had a lot to do. There was a pause. Arthur could hear people going in the hallway. Buzzers hummed. It was strange having a conversation about heaven and hell, he thought. So I trust you to keep... Oh, he said to Arthur. Arthur, I can trust you to keep collecting things while I'm gone. I guess. The same 7 things, right? Yes. They're the building blocks of heaven. Okay. Arthur nodded, as if it made sense. Cardboard and coffee cans and light bulbs were the building blocks of heaven. Everyone knew that, right? You can leave whatever you collect inside the garage. But don't move anything while I'm gone. Everything has its place exactly where it should be. Is that clear? Arthur nodded again. Who knows when I'll get out of here, but until then, here's the keys to the garage. He gave them to Arthur. You can keep an eye on my masterpiece. Thank you for coming to visit St. Arthur. I need to rest now. I will see you later. Arthur picked up the keys reluctantly. He wasn't sure whether to correct Mr. Hampton about the St. Arthur part or what or not. Wait, hold on. Eyes still closed, Mr. Hampton held up one hand in a way that reminded him of Officer Billy. I forgot to thank you for the very nice throne you found last week. It was perfect. Also, I asked the nurse about spare coffee cans and foil, and she said they might have some in the hospital cafeteria. So go check with her before you leave. Okay, Arthur agreed. He slipped around the curtain. Although there was no way he was going to ask the pretty nurse for any leftover garbage from the cafeteria. Even saints had their limits. Outside the room, the hallway was busy. The nurse spotted Arthur as he made the mistake of turning right down the hallway instead of left. The waiting area is this way, she said. How did your visit with your friend go? Fine. He's still a little confused, I think, but we'll take good care of him. Don't worry. She gave Arthur another one of those movie star smiles. He could feel his ears turning beet red. Can I call someone to pick you up? You've been here a very long time by yourself. Arthur knew his mom wouldn't be home yet. She had made plans to spend the day visiting one of his aunts, and she wouldn't be back until late. Barbara was at a neighbor's house. He didn't have Squeak's phone number either. The only person he could think calling for a ride home was the last person he wanted to talk to. Officer Billy. It's a good book. So, quote. I'm looking for the one about this is what heaven is made out of. They are the building blocks of heaven. They're the building blocks of heaven. So our writing next week is going to be more creative. And I want you to start thinking about it right now, in this moment. And you're getting a little bit earlier than tomorrow's announcement. I'm going to ask you to look around and see what are some important things to you. They don't have to be the most important. And I'd like you to find 2 or 3 things. So to James Hampton, the 7 most important things were light bulbs, cardboard. I can't remember. What is important to you? What are some important things to you? I've been asking myself this, and I've been looking around my own house. And what I've come up with so far is, you're going to think this is so strange, but cardboard and light bulbs are strange. My saucepan. My big frying pan. It's one of the most important things. Why? I'm a dad. I have to feed the people in my house so that they grow. And I am constantly using that saucepan. And it's not so much the saucepan. It's that I am nurturing my family. But I realized the frying pan or the saucepan is a symbol. It's the most important thing. It's one of the most important things. So you think about what's important to you. What are some things that are important to you? And then next week, we're going to write about it. Another important thing to me is my musical instruments. This clarinet is very important to me. It's one of the most important things. Why? It's because how I play music to grow as a human. I practice my music. I think about my music. It makes me happy. It makes other people happy. So the thing is just an object. But again, its importance is growing. Its importance is finding what's beautiful. I know we're getting so deep here. All right, it's 11:01, so I'm late to meet the fourth graders already. I'm going to stop this. Fourth graders, get a pencil and paper and your math book. Or a pencil in your math book. Or a pen in your math book. I'll see you then.